The security camera captured a perfect, boring corridor. Fluorescent lights, a locked door, nothing moving but a faint shimmer of dust. The timestamp marched forward like a metronome. And yet 3 people, 2 interns and a janitor, swore they heard it. A scream, not a muffled yelp, not a prank. A full, throat-tearing cry that made one of them drop a mop and back away from the door like it had teeth. Police arrived fast. They pulled the footage, rewound, boosted the audio, and got silence. Clean, digital silence. The kind that makes grown adults shrug and say, "Well, that settles it." Except it didn't. Because if a room can swallow sound while the camera keeps recording reality, then you don't have to hack anything to erase an event. You only have to make it unrecordable. And the weirdest part? The audio wasn't empty. It had tiny artifacts, soft, irregular freckles in the waveform, like a message trying to breathe through a sealed wall. They brought the file to Owen because nobody else wanted it. Owen wasn't a cop, and he wasn't a private eye with a coat collar turned up against the rain. He was a signals and acoustics consultant, one of those people who could stare at a messy audio waveform the way a mechanic listens to an engine. He'd worked on courtroom-grade audio cleanup, on sensor arrays for stadiums, on smart rooms that could make a voice sound warm and close even from the back row. He also had a past. A few years ago, Owen had helped design a system meant to protect privacy. Adaptive panels and emitters that could cancel speech leakage through walls, keeping conference rooms from being listened to. It was elegant physics, sold as safety. Then the wrong client bought it. A rival firm used a version of Owen's work to hide threats made in a boardroom. A whistleblower disappeared. The footage showed calm faces, steady hands, nothing illegal, because the audio was useless. Owen's name never hit the headlines, but he saw it in the court transcripts anyway, like a smear of ink that wouldn't wash out. Since then, he'd been living on careful jobs and careful apologies, trying to earn back a fraction of what he'd accidentally helped break. This new case felt like a rope thrown across a river. A young lab tech named Mia sat in a holding cell, eyes swollen and red-rimmed, accused of assault inside a corporate facility. The witnesses insisted they heard screaming and then a heavy thud. Mia insisted she never touched anyone. The injured employee couldn't clearly describe what happened, only that it was sudden. The police had one anchor and they clung to it like it was granite. The security video. No sound, no struggle, no incident, the detective said, tapping the screen with a pen. People mishear things. People panic. And the corporation, Virelli, wasn't just calm. It was organized. Their lawyers arrived with polite smiles and thick binders, steering the conversation toward procedure and away from doubt. They wanted the case closed quickly, cleanly, without the mess of questions that might drift toward their building design, their contractors, their budgets. Owen watched Mia's public defender try to push back and get swallowed by the weight of digital evidence. When Owen asked to examine the raw audio file, the detective gave him a look like he'd asked to read someone's diary. "You're telling me the camera lied?" "I'm telling you cameras don't have ears," Owen said. "They have microphones, and microphones have blind spots." He said it calmly, but his stomach tightened. Because if he was right, it meant someone had engineered a blind spot on purpose. And if he was wrong, Mia would lose her future, and Owen would lose the one thing he still thought he could earn: a real chance at redemption. He went to a local university panel 2 days later to talk about trust in digital recordings. A clip from the case leaked online. A commentator played the silent hallway video and then cut to Owen's face mid-sentence. The comments were brutal. Audio guy wants attention. Conspiracy in a broom closet. If it's not on video, it didn't happen. By Friday, the department marked the file resolved. By Monday, Varelli's lawyer sent a letter warning Owen against publicly implying misconduct. Owen read it twice, then once more, slower. The case wasn't just closing, it was being sealed. Owen didn't start with a speech. He started with a room. He borrowed an unused rehearsal space in the basement of the university. Bare concrete, a cheap upright piano, a few chairs stacked like forgotten ideas. He asked for one favor from a theater tech named Nora: access to the storage cage where they kept acoustic panels, the kind used to tame echoes for actors who couldn't afford a fancy studio. Nora raised an eyebrow. "You building a podcast bunker?" "Something like that," Owen said, and rolled up his sleeves. He laid the panels out in a shape that looked wrong at first, too open, too uneven. Not a clean box, more like a lopsided cave. He angled 2 panels slightly inward, left a narrow gap behind them, and then placed a thin sheet of plywood between a chair and the wall. Not for soundproofing, but for resonance. He taped a cheap contact microphone, one of those little discs musicians stick to instruments, under the plywood. Then he set up 3 recording devices. One was a standard phone, propped on a stool, its tiny mic facing the center of the room. One was a small handheld recorder with a better microphone, placed 2 feet away from the phone. And the third was a boundary mic, flat, designed to sit on surfaces, taped to the floor just outside his panel arrangement. To a casual observer, it looked like overkill. To Owen, it was a map of how sound could behave when the environment stopped being neutral. "Okay," Nora said, leaning in the doorway. "What am I supposed to do?" "Stand right there," Owen told her, pointing at the center of his panel cave. "And say my name like you're trying to scare me." Nora smirked. Then she yelled, loud enough to make the piano's strings faintly sing. "Owen!" Owen lifted a finger, listening. Outside the panel arrangement, the shout sounded normal, sharp, bright, bouncing off concrete. But inside the little cave, the sound did something strange. It didn't echo. It didn't bloom. It felt pressed, like the air was grabbing it and holding it close. "Again," Owen said. "Owen!" He hit record, then waved Nora out of the pocket and into the open space beside it. She shouted again from only a step away. To Nora's ears, it was obvious. Both shouts were loud. Both were real. She could still feel the vibration in her throat. Owen played the recordings back. On the handheld recorder, both shouts were there, loud and clean. On the boundary mic, both shouts were there too. But one had a duller edge, like it had passed through a curtain. On the phone, on the cheap, everyday microphone, the second shout was clear. The first was not gone, but wrong. It arrived thin and ghostly, as if someone had turned it down and smeared it across time. In the waveform, it didn't look like a healthy spike. It looked like scattered grit. Nora frowned. "That's creepy." "But why?" "Microphones don't hear like people," Owen said. "They're picky. They have sweet spots, they have blind angles, and they make assumptions. And a room can force sound to hit them in ways they're bad at capturing." He walked her back into the pocket and tapped one of the panels with his knuckles. The sound died quickly, like a match snuffed in a jar. "This is a quiet pocket," he said. Not silence. Just a space where sound loses the fight before it reaches the mic. Nora crossed her arms. "So, in that hallway video, someone may have built a pocket," Owen finished. And that was the rule he couldn't unsee anymore. A recording wasn't the event. It was a translation of the event, shaped by physics, by placement, by materials, by tiny design choices nobody thought to question. If Owen took this seriously, he'd be stepping directly on the most comfortable myth in modern policing, the idea that digital evidence is a perfect witness. He looked at the phone's sad, gritty waveform and felt his old guilt stir like a bruise being pressed. Then he made the choice. He wasn't going to argue with the video. He was going to prove the room could lie. Owen's first problem was simple and ugly. There was nothing to trace. If the silence had come from a hacked camera, you could follow the usual breadcrumb trail, login records, firmware changes, network traffic, some digital bruise left on the system. That's how modern investigations were built. Find the intrusion, name the intruder, write the report. But Owen was looking at a crime committed with geometry. If someone shaped the air so the microphone failed, the camera would remain perfectly honest about what it captured. No altered file headers, no suspicious export, no malware, just a clean chain of custody leading straight to the wrong conclusion. That meant the enemy wasn't a ghost in the software. The enemy was a person who understood that evidence had a physical body. The detective didn't even hide his impatience when Owen tried to explain. "You're telling me the hallway has magic furniture?" he said, half laughing, half angry. "Not magic," Owen said. "Angles, surfaces, absorption, reflections. The mic is a tiny ear pointed in one direction. If you make the sound arrive in the direction it hates..." The detective held up a hand. "We don't have time for science fair. The video's clean. The company says the camera system is maintained. End of story." Owen walked out of the precinct with the familiar, bitter taste of being dismissed. He'd seen it before. The moment where curiosity dies because certainty is cheaper. So he changed tactics. If he couldn't follow digital footprints, he'd follow something older. He requested the building's interior refurbishment records through a friend in facilities. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of paperwork that existed because humans love invoices. The response arrived in fragments. A list of vendors, dates, materials, room numbers. And one detail hit him like a cold slap. The corridor outside the incident room had been updated 3 weeks before the event. Not the camera system. The corridor. New decorative, sound-dampening elements, the invoice said. A bench, a wall feature, a freestanding planter. The kind of modern, friendly touch corporations used to make sterile places feel humane. Owen stared at the item names and tried to picture them as weapons. Because if he was right, then the camera didn't need to break. The room needed to be tuned. He needed a controlled test. Nora helped him again, this time by borrowing a handful of props from the theater department. A padded bench, a large wooden panel, 2 fabric-covered dividers, and a broad fake planter stuffed with foam. They set up in the same basement room. Owen placed the phone mic in roughly the position where a hallway camera would listen. Then arranged the furniture in a neat, corporate-looking way. Bench against the wall, planter near a corner, panel as a feature. "Now yell," Owen told Nora. She did. The phone recorded it cleanly. Nothing special. Owen adjusted the bench by a few inches, turning it slightly so its back angled toward the phone. He moved the planter so it blocked a direct path between Nora and the mic. He tilted the wooden panel, not straight, but just enough to change the angle of reflection. Again. Nora yelled, louder this time, and Owen watched the phone's levels twitch like a nervous pulse. When he replayed it, Nora's voice was still audible, barely, but it had that same gritty, smeared quality as before. The sharpness was gone. The body of the sound was thinner. It wasn't silence exactly. It was unusable. Nora blinked at the playback. That's insane. I'm standing right there. You're standing right there, Owen agreed. But the mic isn't hearing what you hear. It's hearing what the room gives it. He pushed the planter 2 inches to the left. The next recording snapped back to normal. 2 inches. Not a malfunction. Not random. A repeatable effect triggered by the placement of specific objects. Owen felt a low, steady chill crawl up his spine. This wasn't a broken camera. This was a dial being turned. The deeper he dug, the uglier it became. The corridor update hadn't been done by Varelli's usual facilities team. It had been subcontracted to accelerate timeline to an interior contractor called Halden Works. Owen found their name in the invoice chain like a fingerprint smudged with latex gloves. He called the number listed. A receptionist answered with bright efficiency. Owen asked about the corridor project. He kept his tone neutral, like he was shopping for services. "I'm sorry," she said. "We can't discuss client layouts." "That's fine," Owen replied. "Can you confirm who supervised installation?" A pause. A click of keys. "That information is confidential." He tried a different approach. Public records, social media, the little trails people left when they bragged about work. He found a photo from an employee party, a group shot in matching polos, holding paint rollers like trophies. In the comments, someone mentioned, "Varelli corridor makeover, finally done." Owen zoomed in on a badge lanyard. The name tag was blurry, but readable enough. Cal. Just Cal. No last name, no helpful link. A human shape with a common name, conveniently unsearchable. Owen wrote it down anyway, because at least now he knew what kind of access was possible. If an installer could move furniture and panels during refurbishment, then an acoustic pocket could be built without anyone touching the camera system at all. No IT trail, no cybercrime unit, just a person with a tape measure and plausible deniability. That realization shifted the case from maybe to someone did this on purpose. And purpose meant motive. Owen's fourth problem arrived the moment he started talking to the wrong people. He showed his demo to Mia's public defender in a cramped office with cheap coffee and a printer that sounded like it was dying. He explained the 2-inch shift, the way the phone mic failed, the way a room could sculpt sound. The defender's eyes widened, not with excitement, but with fear. "If we present this," she said quietly, "we're accusing a major corporation of manipulating evidence. They'll bury us." "They already buried her," Owen said, nodding toward Mia's file. "That's not what I mean," she whispered. "They'll bury you." As if on cue, Owen's phone buzzed. An email. A cease and desist letter sharper than the last, this one from a bigger firm. It didn't just warn him. It named him. It referenced his past work in privacy acoustics and implied he was spreading misinformation to cover his own history. They didn't know his full story, but they knew enough to hurt him. Owen sat back in his chair, feeling the air go heavy. He'd spent years trying to outrun that old mistake, telling himself he was done with big fights, done with headlines, done with being someone people pointed at in courtrooms. Now the same technology, the same physics, was pulling him back into the fire. And worse, if he proved the room could erase a scream, then every prosecutor and every defense attorney would want his methods. Every corporate security team would want to know how to prevent it or how to replicate it. He could become the man who taught the world how to make crimes sound like nothing. The knowledge itself was a loaded weapon. Owen looked down at the phone recording on his screen, a thin, damaged smear where Nora's voice should have been. Proof that the world didn't behave the way people insisted it did. He had what he needed to crack the case, but using it would put a target on his back, and he was suddenly, painfully aware that the most dangerous thing in the room wasn't the silence. It was the decision to break it. Owen made the mistake of listening the way everyone else listened. He kept treating the file like it was missing something loud. A scream, a struggle, the obvious drama that should have been there. He boosted the gain, ran noise reduction, tried different filters. Every time the result stayed the same, a hallway that sounded like nothing. Then, late at night, he stopped chasing volume and started chasing patterns. He zoomed in on the freckles in the waveform, the tiny, irregular bumps that didn't look like normal background noise. Air conditioners have a steady hum. Fluorescent lights have a predictable buzz. This wasn't steady. It came in clusters, like something trying to form syllables but getting crushed. Owen changed tools. Instead of cleaning the signal, he measured it. He ran a spectrogram, time on one axis, frequency on the other, and the silence suddenly had structure. Not a shout, not a slam, something thinner, a whisper. Not whisper as in romantic. Whisper as in close to the microphone, breath heavy, consonants pressed into the air. The kind of sound that doesn't carry far, but carries meaning. Owen felt the hairs on his arms rise. Because if the room had been tuned to swallow loud, broad sound, then a narrow, close sound, one that hugged the microphone's preferred range, could survive. Someone could kill the scream and keep the message. He played the clip again, this time leaning toward the speaker like the speaker was a keyhole. At first it was just breath. Then, buried under the grit, Owen caught fragments, soft clicks and half words. He couldn't swear to full sentences, but he could swear there was intent, a cadence, a sequence. Commands, not help, not stop. More like, now, move, don't. The twist wasn't that the camera failed to capture violence. The twist was that someone used the silence to hide a second track, one that guided what happened while making witnesses sound unreliable. Owen's old plan, find a hacker, prove tampering, collapsed instantly. There was no hacker. There didn't need to be. The file was clean because the manipulation happened before the sound ever reached the device. Physics, not malware. But the whisper created a new path. If loud sound could be swallowed, it still had to go somewhere. Energy doesn't simply vanish. It spreads into walls, floors, objects. A door vibrates, a bench resonates, a window frame shivers. Even if a microphone misses the air pressure changes, the building itself can record a faint echo of the event in its materials. Owen thought of the plywood in his demo, the contact mic that heard what the air mic couldn't. And then he remembered something from the case file that everyone had ignored. The corridor had a badge reader, and it chirped every time someone tapped in. Those systems often logged tiny audio clips for diagnostics. There were also motion sensors with built-in microphones used to calibrate alerts, and a cheap intercom panel down the hall, an always-on device that nobody trusted enough to call evidence. Secondary ears, not courtroom grade, not perfect. But they were attached to surfaces, connected to the building, listening differently. Owen sat very still, the room around him suddenly feeling less like shelter and more like a machine full of hidden microphones. The camera hadn't betrayed the truth. It had simply listened to the wrong part of it. And if Owen could gather the right secondary recordings, vibrations, diagnostic snippets, any accidental trace, he might reconstruct what the hallway tried to swallow. Not by hacking the past, by hearing it the way the building did. Owen didn't storm Varelli's headquarters with a dramatic accusation. He did something quieter, and far more dangerous. He assembled a choir of weak witnesses. First, the badge reader. Its maintenance log held short diagnostic audio clips. Tiny, low-quality snippets meant to verify the beep and the click of its relay. Second, the intercom panel down the hall. It buffered a few seconds of sound whenever someone pressed a button, even if nobody answered. Third, the building's vibration sensors, sold as equipment health monitoring, that stored time-stamped spikes whenever heavy motion hit the floor. None of it was meant to be evidence. That was the point. Owen lined the sources up by timestamp like pieces of torn film. Where the camera's microphone went dead, the floor sensor showed a sharp thump. A half-second later, the badge reader's diagnostic clip caught a breathy cluster. Thin consonants. Too close, too deliberate. The intercom buffer captured a faint scrape and a low murmur that didn't belong in an empty hallway. Individually, each trace was dismissible. Together, they formed a skeleton of the event. Owen built a reconstruction the way paleontologists rebuild dinosaurs. Not by finding the whole animal, but by matching bone to bone until the posture becomes undeniable. He used the vibration spike to anchor the moment of impact. He used the intercom scrape to mark movement. He used the whisper fragments, those clipped now, move, don't, to show intent. Then he added the final piece, his demo. In court, he didn't ask anyone to believe him. He showed them 2 recordings made minutes apart with the same phone, the same voice, the same room. Only the furniture shifted by inches. One recording captured a shout clearly. The other reduced it to gritty dust. "This is not a broken camera," Owen said. "This is a tuned space." Varelli's attorney stood fast, smiling. Speculation. Coincidence. So Owen named the practical reality. Someone had access to the corridor layout. Someone who could move the bench, angle the wall feature, place the planter where it turned a microphone blind. The judge ordered the refurbishment records produced in full. And Cal, just Cal, showed up in them. Not as a random worker, but as a supervisor who had signed off on final placement. When investigators questioned him, he tried the old defense. "I just followed the plan." Except Owen's reconstruction had already proven there was a plan inside the plan. A quiet pocket built to make one kind of sound disappear while another, close, whispered instruction, survived. Cal cracked when confronted with the alignment tests. He didn't confess to acoustic engineering. He confessed to being told to set it exactly right and not ask why. An insider higher up, someone who needed the hallway to be a stage where violence could happen without audio. Mia walked out free. Owen didn't walk out untouched. His remaining corporate clients dropped him within a week. One contract vanished overnight. A colleague stopped returning calls. The university asked him, politely, to keep a lower profile. The same internet that had mocked him now called him dangerous for undermining trust in evidence. But something else happened too. The detective who dismissed him requested training. A prosecutor asked for new guidelines. A judge recommended that digital recordings be treated as instruments, not oracles. Tools that can fail in specific, physical ways. Owen sat alone one evening, replaying the original silent hallway clip. It looked as ordinary as ever. That was what frightened him most. He shut his laptop and spoke into the quiet, as if the room itself were listening. "A recording doesn't lie," he said. "Your certainty does. When you assume silence means emptiness."